She's not really family. She's the charity case who grades papers for rent. The line cracked across the terrace before the lake settled again. Heads turned, glass chimed. Someone laughed, too loudly. I stood there with a napkin in my hand and tried to breathe like it was just a joke, like Richard's voice didn't carry all the way to the dock. The lake house glittered in white. Linen chairs, white roses, white dresses. The terrace hung over Lake Tahoe like a glass tray, and every table had candles that made the water look expensive. Chloe glided through people in satin, gold clipped in her hair, and phones floated after her like fish. Valerie touched Chloe's necklace and straightened her shoulders as if prepping a display. I tucked my thrifted dress under the chair and pressed the hem flat so it wouldn't wrinkle more. "Family only by the rail," Valerie called toward me, smiling for the guests. "The pictures look cleaner." I moved anyway. A server slid a flute into my hand. The bubbles climbed too fast. Richard lifted his glass. "To Chloe," he said, and the terrace quieted. "Brand deals, real vision, actual accomplishment." People clapped. Someone whistled. An aunt leaned across me and said, "You still at that school?" She waved her hand like she was swatting a fly. "Guidance hall duty, right?"
"I'm the counselor," I said, keeping my voice level. "High school." "Adorable," she said, and turned her back before I finished the sentence. The band eased into soft jazz. Forks clicked. A content creator talked about conversions. I chewed a tiny scallop and heard my name bounce between tables like a game I never learned. The night smelled like rosemary and money. I smiled when people looked and let it drop when they didn't. The server came back with a leather folder and set it by my plate. His face carried that careful kindness people wear when they know a knife's coming. He opened it and stepped away. $3,980. My stomach went tight. I reached for my purse slowly, like the move itself might make less noise. The table watched. Phones tilted. Richard pretended not to watch at all. I pulled out my card. The plastic felt damp against my fingers. The server's device blinked red. He glanced up. "It's not going through," he said softly. "It will," I answered. I kept my eyes on the screen. I tried again. Red. I tried the debit card. Red. My breath went short. My hands shook. The flap of the folder thudded against the plate. Chloe leaned in, perfume fresh and bright. "Public service isn't profitable, huh?" she said lightly, like she was giving me a brand tip. The table laughed. Valerie's laugh lifted over them, clean and trained. "Sweetheart," Valerie said, not bothering to lower her voice, "we tried to warn you about career choices." A cousin covered his mouth like he was being polite, then let the laugh out anyway. Forks paused. A glass clinked 3 seats away, like someone caught the sound and wanted more. Sweat gathered at the back of my neck. I kept my lips pulled into something that looked like a smile because that's what they taught me. Don't show a student your panic. Don't show a room your pain. "Want me to spot you?" the aunt said, eyes kind enough to sting. "You can Venmo me later, if you figure out the app." I reached for the device one more time. The screen flashed the same refusal. Every beep felt like a slap, sharp and neat. "Budgeting is a grown-up skill," Richard announced to no one in particular. People laughed again, softer, the way they do when they know they shouldn't but want to belong. I swallowed and set the card down. My fingers wouldn't stop shaking, so I hid them in my lap and smoothed the dress again, like that small control could fix anything. The server opened his mouth, ready to offer an exit. Chloe lifted her phone, pretending to read a message, lens pointed down just enough to catch my face. "Smile," she whispered, and that one word tasted like salt. I stood. "I'm going to get some air," I said. My voice held. Barely. The terrace door slid open, and cold lake air found my skin. Music thinned behind me. I walked to the rail where the water matched the sky and the lamps cut a path to the dock. The glass wall held a reflection I didn't want, my cheap dress, my red face, my jaw tight like I was heading into a fight I hadn't chosen. My phone buzzed. "Principal Ortega, you okay?" I stared at the screen until the dots blurred and set it face down on the rail. Wind lifted the edge of the napkin still clenched in my hand. I pressed it flat and forced a long breath, the kind I teach freshmen before they walk back into class after crying in the bathroom. A server slipped outside and stood near me, not too close. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "we can split it across cards, or I can—" "It's fine," I said. "Thank you." The words came out rough. He nodded and left them at my feet like a folded towel. Laughter leaked through the doors. Chloe's. Valerie's. Someone said my name, and another someone corrected my title like it was a punchline. I watched a boat slide across the water, slow, the wake folding light into itself. Shoes tapped on the deck behind me. I didn't turn. The sound stopped a few feet back. Silence stretched. Not the sticky kind, not pity, just present. "You're Marina," a voice said, low and even. I looked over my shoulder. An older man in a dark jacket stood there, his tie a little loose like he had pulled it down to breathe. He wasn't
"Marina," someone called, sweet and firm. "Maybe sit this one out?" I didn't turn. I watched the water until my breathing settled into something I could recognize. A staffer in black stepped up the dock with a clipboard, looking for someone. The older man lifted 2 fingers. The staffer came to him fast. "Everything okay, sir?" she asked. He nodded toward the terrace. "Busy," he said. Then he leaned a breath closer to her. I didn't hear it first. The wind moved through the trees. The staffer angled her ear. He spoke with the same steady tone he'd used with me. "Get me her name," he said. A pause. "Quietly." The staffer's eyes flicked to me and away. She nodded. "Yes, sir." The man didn't look at me again. He adjusted his jacket as if nothing had happened and walked back toward the glow. The doors slid open for him, swallowing his shape, and the room rose to meet whoever he was. I stood there, hand still on the cold rail, listening to the lake and the clatter and the soft fake laughter. Somewhere inside they angled themselves in perfect white. Somewhere inside, the bill still sat in a leather folder with a total that felt like a slap. The band eased into another song. A glass broke. People cheered like it was part of the show. I picked up my phone, wiped the screen on the hem of my dress, and slid it into my bag. My palms had stopped shaking. Not because anything was fixed, because the air was colder than the room, and I could stand in it without cracking. The terrace called for one more toast. I let the words drift over the water and fade. Behind me, the staffer hurried along the rail with her clipboard and a whisper. Inside, someone asked where I went. Someone else laughed and said it didn't matter. I looked at the dock lights, the line they drew toward the dark, and stayed exactly where I was. I closed my apartment door with my hip and set the grocery sack on the counter. The place was quiet, air conditioner ticking, fridge humming, shoes scraping my heels after the drive. I unlaced them and left them by the mat. The dress still smelled like someone else's perfume from the lake house, sweet and heavy, stuck to my collar like a stain I couldn't wash yet. I ran the tap, filled the kettle, and waited for the water to admit it was hot. My phone face down on the table, screen dark, a small mercy. I opened my laptop to finish a crisis report I'd promised myself I'd file tonight. The cursor blinked in the empty box. I typed a student's initials, backspaced, typed them again. The keys went fuzzy. In my ears, the terrace kept playing. Glass clinking, Chloe's laugh, Valerie's line about career choices. I shut the laptop and slid it away like it could talk back. The kettle rattled. I poured water over a tea bag that looked older than it should be and stood at the sink with the mug pressed to my hands. My phone buzzed. Unknown 916 number. Late enough that normal people were asleep. I let it buzz out. It buzzed again, then a third time, patient, as if whoever it was knew I was pretending not to hear. I flipped it over. Unknown caller? I lifted the mug, burned my lip, and answered. This is Gerald Whitman. I didn't say anything for a breath. The lake house door sliding closed. The older man by the rail. The way he didn't look away when I couldn't make the card work. His voice on my line sounded steadier than the day. I sat 2 tables behind you, he said.
No one earns humiliation for helping others. The tea cooled in my hand. I leaned my hip against the counter because my knees were not as brave as my mouth. "I'm fine," I said. It came out thin and useless. "I don't think you are," he said. Not rude, not soft, just true. "You shouldn't call this late," I said, "because rules are a railing when the floor shifts." "Then I'll keep it short," he said. "I want to know how many kids at your school are hungry." I stared at the microwave clock. 11:52 p.m. Too many. "How do you know?" "They tell me. Or I notice they hoard crackers, or they sleep through first period because they live in a car with the engine off." "What do you do when that happens?" "I walk them to the nurse for snacks," I said. "I call shelters. I ask a cafeteria manager I'm on a first-name basis with. Sometimes I buy granola bars on my way in." He didn't answer at once. I could hear something in the background, like a dog's collar or a second line being lifted and put back down. "You buy them yourself?" "Yeah." "How often?" "Enough that the woman at the corner store knows which kind," I said, and tried to smile into the cup. "That's not a complaint," he said. "That's a fact." "It's not smart," I said, because I've heard that as both advice and insult. "Smart isn't the point," he said. "You care." That's rarer. The apartment settled around those words. I set the mug down because my finger...
The line went quiet. I picked my mug up, missed my mouth a little, and laughed at myself because my choices were laugh or cry, and I hate crying on the phone. "You don't know me," I said. "I watched your family know you," he said. "That was enough for tonight." We stood in that quiet together for a few seconds that didn't feel empty. I wiped the ring of tea off the counter with my sleeve and decided I cared more about being steady than being neat. "I live in Davis," he said. "A small farmhouse." "Come on Saturday." "What for?" "To talk," he said. "No photographers. No family. Just you." "That's kind," I said, because it was the only word that wasn't suspicious or grateful or both. "It's practical," he said. "I'd like to hear more about your school. I'd like to see what you bring to work that no one sees on a spreadsheet." I looked toward the bookcase where kids' thank you notes sat crooked, stuck with tape that lost its fight last week. One had a drawing of a dog that looked like a cloud. Another just said, "Thanks for snacks," in blue marker. I reached for my wallet by reflex, found nothing I needed there, and laughed again. "What time Saturday?" 10. Front gate will be open." I shifted the phone to my other ear. "My family—" "Don't tell Valerie or Richard," he said. "They crave an audience." My hand tightened on the mug. "You know them." "I know people who prefer applause to substance," he said. "They're not rare." I set the mug down and tried to hold it with both hands to stop the small tremor. The tea sloshed and hit my jeans. A warm stripe spread down my thigh. "Great," I said. "Now I'm clumsy on the phone." "You did nothing wrong," he said. "Tonight or now." I swallowed. The sentence landed in a place that usually only hurt. "Okay. Bring what represents your work most," he said. "Don't overthink it." "I don't have much." "You have exactly what you need," he said. "Saturday. Saturday," I repeated. He paused as if to make sure I wasn't just echoing. "Good night, Ms. Cole." "Good night," I said, and the line clicked quiet. I stood there a moment with the phone against my ear, even though the call was over. Then I set it on the table and went to the bookcase. The cards leaned into each other like they knew a draft was coming. I pulled one free and the others slid down in a soft shuffle. I picked up the blue marker, "Thanks for snacks," then the cloud dog. My fingers steadied as soon as they had something to protect. The phone buzzed again. A text. "Gerald Whitman. Thank you for showing up for children. E.W." I stared at the words until the screen dimmed. I slid the phone into my pocket and took a breath you can only take when nobody's watching. I found a thin folder in my desk, the kind I save for parent meetings, and lined the cards inside like they were fragile. Tape peeled off my thumb and stuck to the edge. I pressed it flat. In the bathroom, I scrubbed the T line off my jeans with a washcloth and didn't care that it left a darker patch.
The drive to Davis felt longer than usual, even though it was barely an hour from Sacramento. My hands were cold on the steering wheel. I kept glancing at the paper bag beside me, the one holding a few student thank you cards I'd printed out, like he'd asked. The road opened into farmland, quiet and wide, the kind of peace that makes you feel seen and small at the same time. Dr. Whitman's farmhouse sat at the edge of a field of lavender. The scent hit me before I even parked. It wasn't some mansion like my mother's friends bragged about visiting, just a 2-story home with peeling paint and a porch that looked lived in. He stood by the door with 2 mugs of coffee, wearing a faded sweater and an expression that felt calm, too calm. "Come on in," he said. His voice was softer than I remembered. I stepped inside, expecting lawyers or secretaries, but it was just him. The table was covered in papers, but not the glossy kind. Letters, blueprints, receipts, real work. I sat across from him, clutching my tote to my chest. He slid a mug toward me. "You take it black, right?" I nodded, though my hands were shaking. The silence stretched. I could hear birds outside, and for a moment it almost felt peaceful, until he said, "I wanted you to see something." He reached for a manila envelope sealed with a dark blue legal stamp. He set it down between us like a test. "Open it," he said.
My fingers trembled. The flap tore unevenly. Inside was a printed document with my name bold across the top. Last will and testament. I blinked, reading line after line, the words blurring before my eyes. Then I saw it. Primary heir, Marina Cole. I froze. What is this? He took a slow sip of his coffee. Balance. I looked at him confused. "You can't mean—" "I do," he said quietly. "You've given your time to people who can't repay you. You buy food for kids who shouldn't go hungry. You care in silence while the rest of them chase applause." I tried to find words, but nothing made sense. "I don't want charity," I finally said. His mouth curved into the faintest smile. "This isn't charity. This is merit." I shook my head. "You barely know me." He leaned back, his voice calm but unshakable. "I know enough. I know what it looks like when someone works without being seen. Chloe performs success," he said, looking toward the open window. "But you practice it." I felt my chest tighten. I wanted to defend myself, but what could I say? Every part of me was tired of explaining why I'd chosen the job I had, the life I had. He continued, "This isn't about punishing them. It's about rewarding what's real. You live it, you don't sell it." The words hit harder than I expected. For so long I had been the quiet one, the unremarkable one, the second choice. Now, sitting in that sunlit room, someone finally said the thing I'd always hoped was true. I swallowed hard. Why me? He looked straight at me. "Because you remind me of who I used to be, before I started caring how success looked." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I stared at the papers again. Whitman Compass Initiative. A trust worth nearly $500 million. It didn't feel real. He reached out, tapping the top of the page. "This initiative will help schools like yours. It'll feed the kids who fall through the cracks. You'll oversee it when the time comes." "When the time comes?" I echoed. He nodded. "Not yet." "There are conditions," I waited. "No."
By the time I reached my apartment, the sky had turned a muted gold. I set the envelope on my kitchen table and just stared at it. I should have felt grateful, maybe even proud. Instead, I felt dizzy, like I'd stepped into a world that didn't belong to me. That night, I barely slept. Every sound felt louder than it was, the hum of the fridge, the passing cars, my own heartbeat in my ears. I kept thinking about his words. "You live it, you don't sell it." At dawn, I finally drifted off on the couch, still in my clothes. When I woke, the light was gray, and my phone screen was glowing with a new notification, an email, from Gerald Whitman. The subject line read, "Proof of fairness begins." I sat there for a full minute staring at those words. My chest went cold. Whatever this meant, it wasn't over. It was just beginning. It was overcast that morning, the kind of gray that sits heavy on your skin. I parked across from St. Francis Chapel and just sat there for a minute, staring at the rows of black cars lined up like a magazine spread. Reporters were already there, leaning on tripods, fixing their mics, pretending to whisper. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. No makeup, no jewelry, just a plain black dress and tired eyes. I didn't look like the daughter of anyone worth $500 million, and maybe that was the point. The flashes started before I even reached the steps. "Marina, this way! 1 photo, please!" someone called, like it was an award show, not a funeral. I kept walking. My heels clicked against the stone, the sound swallowed by the low murmur of expensive grief. Inside, the air smelled like lilies and perfume that cost more than my car. Chloe stood near the altar, head tilted for the photographers, her black couture dress hugging her like a headline. Valerie was front and center, face powdered perfectly, holding a tissue that looked like it had been staged. Every sob had rhythm, every tear caught the right light. I slipped into a pew at the very back near the exit. My chair creaked. No one turned. Maybe that was better. When the organ started, Valerie took the microphone, pressing it close like a performer. "Gerald was family," she said, voice trembling on cue. "He taught us generosity, legacy, and grace." She paused just long enough for the camera shutters to catch her profile. I watched her lips tremble, and I couldn't tell if it was acting or pride. Near the front, Lydia Hines, Dr. Whitman's attorney, sat perfectly still. I hadn't spoken to her since that day in Davis. She looked calm, detached, like someone waiting for a train to arrive on time. There was a thick leather folder in her lap. After the hymn, Valerie stepped aside and dabbed her eyes delicately. Lydia rose. Her heels echoed across the chapel floor. She didn't look at anyone, just went straight to the podium. "At Dr. Gerald Whitman's request," she said, her voice steady, "certain public bequests will be announced today." The air changed. You could feel it, like everyone suddenly remembered they were in a room with money. Cameras lifted again. Valerie straightened her back. Chloe smoothed her dress, ready for her moment. Lydia began reading. "To the Whitman Foundation Board, a donation of $15 million to expand scholarship programs. To the Sacramento Arts Fund." The list went on, applause murmuring after each name. I relaxed a little. Maybe that was all. Maybe he'd decided to keep everything quiet. Then Lydia's tone shifted. "To Marina Cole," she read slowly, "for unpublic service and compassion." The entire room stilled. You could hear fabric move like 100 people turning at once. My heart stopped. I didn't even realize my hands had tightened around the edge of the pew until my knuckles turned white. Valerie's neck snapped toward me, her mouth slightly open. Chloe froze, eyes wide, mascara already smudged from earlier tears she didn't mean. "What?" she said, too loud. Then again, sharper. "What?" Lydia didn't flinch. She kept reading. "Dr. Whitman recognized Miss Cole's dedication to youth mental health and wishes to honor her with a personal trust contribution." The whispers erupted. "Who is she again? Isn't that the counselor? Wasn't she the one humiliated at the lake?" The sound grew like static, bouncing off the high ceilings. Chloe stepped forward, pointing at me. "She tricked him," she yelled. "This is fraud." The reporters loved it. Camera flashes burst like fireworks. Valerie stood behind her, whispering sharply, "Chloe, not here." But it was too late. The scene had already broken open. I stayed seated, trying to breathe evenly. The heat from the lights burned my face. My bag trembled in my lap. I could feel people staring, waiting for me to defend myself, to say something dramatic. I didn't. I just lowered my gaze to the floor and counted the lines in the tile until the noise blurred into nothing. Then Lydia spoke again, voice calm over the chaos.
Dr. Whitman requested one additional note be delivered privately. She gathered her papers, stepped down from the podium, and walked straight toward me. My stomach flipped. I thought she might take it back, say it was a mistake. But she didn't. She leaned close and placed a small cream-colored card in my hand. "He matched every cent you donated," she whispered. "Every lunch, every fundraiser. He saw you." The card listed the amounts: $25, $40, $60, each one with his signature beside it. Small, ordinary acts mirrored by a man worth nearly $500 million. I swallowed hard. "He believed in impact, not filters," I said quietly. Lydia nodded, her eyes soft. Then she turned away, leaving me with the card trembling between my fingers.
Up front, Valerie had regained her balance, her voice once again syrupy for the press. "Gerald was a man of complicated generosity," she said, forcing a smile. "We'll handle everything properly." She smoothed Chloe's arm, guiding her back toward the cameras, and they both posed like nothing had happened. The choir started again. The sound felt wrong, too sweet for the tension still hanging in the air. I slipped out before the final hymn ended. My heels clicked against the marble, each step a little faster than the one before. Outside, the wind had picked up. Reporters crowded near the exit, their microphones raised. "Marina! Did you know you were in the will? Did you influence him? Are you taking the inheritance?" I pushed through them, eyes fixed on the parking lot. Just as I reached the curb, I heard Richard's voice behind me, calm but cutting. He was standing with a small cluster of journalists, his hand resting on Valerie's shoulder. "We'll fight this in court," he said. I stopped walking. For a second, everything went quiet, just that one sentence echoing behind me. I didn't turn around. The cameras clicked, the crowd buzzed again, and I walked faster toward my car. The card was still in my hand, edges damp from my palm. I tucked it inside my bag and shut the door behind me. When the engine started, I finally let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Outside, the chapel bells began to ring, one after another, heavy and slow. I watched the reporters scatter, the family posing one last time in front of the marble steps. Their black clothes, their perfect faces, their hollow smiles. He deserved better than that show. I pulled away from the curb and didn't look back. The courthouse smelled like old paper and coffee that had burned hours ago. Reporters filled the steps outside, their microphones waiting like open mouths. Cameras flashed, and someone shouted my name, but I just kept walking. Lydia was beside me, heels steady on the marble. "Breathe," she said quietly. "Let them tire before you do." I nodded, but my throat felt tight. Inside, the air was cold, humming with whispers. Wooden benches creaked as people turned to look. The judge hadn't entered yet, but the family had. Front row, polished and perfect. Valerie wore her pearl necklace and that expression she saved for charity events. Chloe sat next to her, in beige, pretending to be fragile. Richard leaned back in his seat like this was another business meeting. None of them looked at me, and somehow that hurt worse than if they had. When the bailiff called for order, the silence was heavy. The family's lead attorney rose first, a tall man in an expensive gray suit. His voice was sharp, practiced. "Your Honor, my clients were manipulated during their time of grief by Ms. Marina Cole." A low murmur swept through the room. I felt my pulse in my throat. He clicked a remote and a screen flickered on. Pictures appeared. Me and Dr. Whitman sitting together at his farmhouse porch, me handing him student letters, him smiling at something I said. The attorney pointed. "This is not mentorship. This is undue closeness." The crowd whispered again. Someone near the back said, "She charmed him." My stomach dropped. Those photos weren't real, not completely. I remembered the day we met on that porch, but these angles, these smiles, they'd been altered. Lydia leaned toward the judge. "We'll address that, Your Honor." The attorney continued, voice rising. "Within months of these interactions, Dr. Whitman altered his will, redirecting nearly $500 million to this woman, a public school employee with no family relation. We ask, what influenced that decision?"
He let the question hang, turning slightly toward the reporters seated behind. It wasn't a legal move. It was theater. Lydia stood. Her voice didn't need volume to cut through the air. "Your Honor, those photos are manipulated." He scoffed. "Convenient." "Not convenient." She clicked her own remote. The same images reappeared, this time with analysis overlays. Pixel mapping, depth mismatch, metadata timestamps. Lydia looked straight at the judge. "Fabrications." Then at the attorney. "Would you like to guess who paid the PR firm to make them?" The man stiffened. "Objection! Irrelevant!" "Sustained," the judge said. But the damage was done. You could feel it, the shift, the pause in the audience's breathing. Lydia walked to our table, then to the evidence cart. "Your Honor, we'd like to present video documentation recorded 6 weeks before Dr. Whitman's passing." The bailiff connected the USB. The lights dimmed slightly as the screen came to life. There he was, Dr. Gerald Whitman, sitting upright in his chair, papers spread in front of him. His voice was clear. "This is my decision," he said. "It is informed, not pressured." No one spoke. Not a cough, not a whisper. Valerie froze, her hand half covering her mouth. Chloe blinked rapidly, mascara streaking faintly. Even Richard's jaw clenched. Lydia turned off the screen. "That recording is time-stamped and certified by his attending physician, confirming full mental competence." She looked at me. "Would you like to add anything, Marina?" I stood slowly. The courtroom lights seemed brighter now. My knees felt weak, but I held the edge of the table. My voice came out softer than I expected. "He didn't save me," I said. "He saw me." That was all.
The reporters scribbled. Cameras clicked. The room exhaled all at once, like it had been waiting for that one line. The judge nodded slightly. "Continue." Lydia opened another folder, pulling out highlighted papers. "We also present financial records from the Baxter family's memorial charity, documents showing misuse of restricted funds." Valerie turned pale. Chloe's head dropped. Lydia kept going, calm as ever. "Advertising campaigns, luxury retreats, all funded under a memorial grant meant for underprivileged students." The judge frowned, tapping his pen. "Misuse of restricted funds," he repeated. "Noted." The gavel struck once. The sound echoed through my chest. For the first time that day, the family didn't look untouchable. Valerie's eyes darted toward Richard, searching for help. He didn't meet her gaze. Chloe stared at her hands, trembling. The judge called for recess. The room erupted in sound, reporters whispering, phones buzzing, shoes scraping the floor. I sank back into my chair, exhaling for what felt like the first time all morning. My hands hurt. When I looked down, I saw crescent marks from my own nails. Lydia leaned in. That went better than they expected. I nodded, but words didn't come. As we walked out into the hallway, the noise outside hit again. Camera flashes, voices, questions flying at me like stones. "Marina, did you influence him? Are you the real heir? Do you regret accepting it?" I kept walking. My steps were steady this time. Behind me, I heard her voice, Valerie's, sharp and low, meant for my ears. "We'll ruin your reputation." I stopped for half a second. The hallway lights flickered over the marble floor. I didn't turn around. Lydia's hand brushed my arm. "Keep moving." So I did. Past the cameras, past the noise, out into the glare of the afternoon. I could still hear her voice behind me, her anger hiding under all that control. But something in me had changed. They had their lawyers, their cameras, their perfect story. I had the truth, and for the first time, that felt like enough to fight back. The morning started quiet. I poured coffee, scrolled my phone, and the headline hit me like a slap. "Guidance Counselor Scams Tech Magnate." My picture from the courthouse. Notifications rolled in. Parents groups, local blogs, strangers who suddenly knew my soul. A meme with my face next to a gold shovel. "Gold-digging counselor strikes jackpot." The comments loaded faster than I could blink. I turned the sound off and it still felt loud. I texted Lydia.
They're saying I scammed him." She replied in seconds, "Don't say a word online. Let them burn their own lies." I drove to the school to pick up a box of my things. The gate scanner flashed red. I tried again. Red. A security guard I knew, quiet guy, kind eyes, stepped forward like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Sorry, Miss Cole, I can't let you in." I nodded like it didn't sting. "It's fine." It wasn't. A teacher I'd mentored saw me and looked away. The kind of turn that says, "I can't be seen with you." My throat closed. I tucked my hands into my sleeves so he couldn't see them shaking. Back home, the group chat that used to light up during lunch was ice cold. I opened my inbox. Dozens of messages from strangers. Liar, thief, fake saint. I put the phone face down and slid to the kitchen floor. No sobs, just water leaking out of my eyes while the fridge hummed. My dog pressed his head against my knee. I scratched behind his ear to prove I was still there. The bank email hit next. Account temporarily frozen pending investigation. I laughed once, flat, tired. Bills piled on the counter like a countdown. The rent notice showed final in thick red. I pressed my palms to my eyes until little sparks popped behind my lids. Something slipped under the door. A gray envelope, no return address, the paper heavy like it cost more than my shoes. One word in the corner, trace sphere. I stood too fast, knees buzzing. Inside, photocopied invoices stamped paid, a PR firm billing $350,000 to something called Narrative Repair, Baxter Family. Line items, message placement, crisis influencer outreach, image manipulation. Next, a small USB taped to a sticky note. Follow the PR firm, Trace Sphere. I stared at the flash drive like it might bite. Then I opened my laptop and plugged it in. A video player launched. A dark office appeared on screen. Concrete floor, metal shelves, boxes stacked to the ceiling. Chloe stepped into the frame in a black hoodie, hair tied high. She didn't look glamorous. She looked busy. She fed a folder into a small burn barrel, then another. Paper curled and turned to ash. Someone off camera spoke, voice calm and cruel. "Richard, delete every trace. She doesn't exist in this narrative." My heart thudded so hard my chair scraped back. I paused, rewound, played it again. Same line, same fire, same voices that laughed at me over oysters and champagne. I called Lydia. My voice came out rough. "We have a lead." "What is it?" "PR invoices, trace sphere, and a video. Chloe burning documents, Richard telling her to erase me. "Keep everything safe," she said. "Don't move. I'll handle it." I pulled the flash drive out and set it on the table like a fragile bone. My dog circled once and lay down on my foot. I watched the door, half expecting it to swing open. It didn't. What did was the noise outside, reporters back on the sidewalk, lenses aimed at my window. For days I'd kept the curtains closed. I'd eaten on the floor and whispered in my own home like walls could gossip. I stood. I walked to the window. I took a breath that shook. Then I pulled the curtains wide. Cameras lifted in a wave. I didn't smile. I didn't hide. I just looked straight out. A notification badge flashed on the TV across the street in the cafe window. The crawl at the bottom of a local news segment rolled past. District Attorney reviewing Baxter PR trail. The room felt different. Same walls, same mess, but the air moved. I called Lydia again. "You saw it?" "Yes, it's moving." "What do I do?" "Eat," she said. "Shower. Keep the originals safe. And answer no one." I did what she said. I ate toast standing at the sink because the counter was covered in bills and I couldn't look at them again. I showered hot enough to steam the mirror. The red around my eyes slid down the drain. When I came out, the phone buzzed 3 times in a row. Unknown numbers, unknown numbers, unknown numbers. I let them ring. Someone knocked. I tensed and didn't breathe. Another envelope slipped under the door. Same gray, same weight. Inside, 3 glossy printouts, screen captures of social accounts I recognized from the memes earlier. A note. Paid placements. TraceSphere affiliate IDs attached. I photographed everything and backed it up twice. Hard drive, cloud. Then I put the originals in a freezer bag and slipped them under the loose floorboard behind my couch. I could feel my heartbeat in my fingers as I pressed the board down. The phone rang again. I answered this one. Marina, Channel 9, can we talk? Not today. Do you want to respond to the fraud claims? I looked at the hidden floorboard, at the dog asleep on my towel, at my own hands finally steady. You'll hear from me when it matters. I hung up. The building hallway echoed with voices, neighbors whispering, a door closing, footsteps retreating. I opened my own door, checked the peephole, then stepped back and laughed once, low and real. Not happy, not bitter, just human. I cleaned the table for the first time in days. I set the flash drive in the center like a compass. The gray envelope sat in a neat stack at its side. I wiped the counter, tossed the takeout cups, fed the dog. When he finished, he looked up with that soft face like nothing in the world had changed. I knelt and pressed my forehead to his.
The sun slid down the block. Evening settled, and the reporters outside traded shifts. I made another cup of coffee and didn't let it go cold. Across the street, the TV crawl ran the line again. District Attorney reviewing Baxter PR trail. I watched it pass twice. 3 times. The phone buzzed one more time. Lydia. Stay ready, she said. The wind's changing. I know. I walked back to the window and lifted the curtain higher. Lenses lifted with it, hungry and rude. I let them have the shot. Me in a cheap sweatshirt, hair damp, eyes clear. I didn't give them a smile or a quote. I gave them a look that said I wasn't going anywhere. It's turning now, I said, barely louder than a breath. My chest rose and settled. My hands were finally still. The dog leaned against my leg, warm and solid. The storm hadn't passed, but it had shifted, and for the first time since the headline, I stood up straight and faced it. The community hall buzzed like a beehive before dawn. Folding chairs scraped the floor. Shoes shuffled. People settled with that hungry calm that means they want a show. I wiped my palms on my skirt and walked down the middle aisle with Lydia. She carried the case file tight against her ribs. I could feel her breath steady and even. Mine wasn't. We present facts, she said without looking at me. Let them choke on the truth. I nodded and kept moving. My chest rose fast. My mouth felt dry. Reporters hunched near the front with tablets pressed to their knees. Parents clustered together, whispering. The school board sat stiff along a table, nameplates shining under bad lights. I took the seat beside the podium. My fingers wouldn't stop picking at the edge of my jacket. Lydia set 3 binders on the table. She waited for the room to quiet, then lifted the first. Exhibit A, she said into the mic, voice clear. TraceSphere invoices, paid after Dr. Whitman's death. A screen behind her lit up. Pages of billing filled the display. Line items scrolled. Narrative repair, Baxter family. Message placement, crisis influencers, image manipulation. The letters looked ugly and plain, which somehow made them worse. Murmurs rolled through the room. A reporter near the aisle whispered, "So it was them?" He forgot to lower his voice. People heard. Heads turned. Exhibit B, Lydia continued. She didn't pause. Video evidence authenticated by 2 forensic analysts. The screen cut to a dim office. Boxes lined the walls. A small metal barrel burned. Chloe stepped into frame with a stack of folders, hair pulled tight, a hoodie tugged over her wrists. She fed the papers to the flame with fast, jerky movements. Off-screen, Richard's voice sounded like a door closing. Delete every trace. She doesn't exist in this narrative. The room held its breath. I could count my own heartbeats. 1, 2, 3. Valerie stood so quickly her chair hit the floor. That video's edited. Lies. Her hands shook, but her lipstick didn't move. Lydia tilted her head a fraction. Your voice, too, Mrs. Baxter. The crowd shifted. Some people coughed to hide laughs. A mother I recognized from school crossed her arms and stared at Valerie like she was finally seeing her. Chloe sunk into her chair, fingers pressed into her temples. Lydia lifted the 3rd binder. Exhibit C,
handwritten notes from Dr. Whitman. She opened to photocopies of lined cards. He matched Ms. Cole's small donations. Every dollar doubled by him. The screen filled with messy ink. 25 for lunches, 40 for uniforms, 60 for bus fare. Then his handwriting, neat and careful. Matched. Keep giving. I felt my throat close. I swallowed it down. Soft clapping started in the last row. It spread in uncertain ripples, then steadied. A board member frowned and tapped his gavel for quiet, but the sound had already landed. Something in the room had turned. Lydia stepped back from the podium. She looked at me and then at the microphone. I stood on legs that didn't feel like mine. I leaned in, hands flat on the wood. The board stared at me as if bracing for drama. I gave them a line he would have liked. Facts don't fear cameras. Everything stilled. No coughs, no shoes moving, just breathing. Even the reporters froze, waiting for more. I didn't give them more. I stepped away. A board member stood, a square man with a neat tie. Ms. Cole, your suspension will be lifted. Probation pending final review. I nodded once. My eyes burned, but nothing fell. Lydia closed the binders, precise and quiet, as if she'd been packing up messes her whole life. They're turning, she whispered, slowly. Keep your head down. Reporters rose like a tide when I left the podium. How does it feel to be vindicated? Do you plan to sue? Do you forgive them? Mics pushed forward. I smelled cologne and stale coffee and fear. I kept my chin level. He built truth. I'm just standing in it. A man from the district attorney's office walked to the front with a folder under his arm. He introduced himself, then faced the room. The district attorney's office is opening a criminal investigation into misuse of estate funds. The air cracked open. People shouted questions. Several stood on their chairs to see. Flash after flash lit the faces around me, harsh and white. Chloe turned to Valerie and started to cry. Not the staged kind from the funeral. Real crying that wrinkles the whole face. Valerie gripped her purse so tightly her knuckles went pale. Richard did not blink. He stared forward, jaw tight, calculating.
Lydia angled her body to block me from a few microphones.
Exit left, she said softly. Short steps. She guided me down the side aisle. I brushed shoulders with people who had called me a thief last week. No one met my eyes now. I reached the rear door when a commotion erupted near the front. Shouts, chairs scraping. I turned. Valerie swayed, blinked hard, then folded onto the carpet like someone cut her strings. "Call an ambulance," a voice yelled. 2 people lunged for her. Chloe panicked, grabbing at her mother's wrist, sobbing. I froze. Not from triumph, not from pity, just stunned stillness. My pulse thudded in my throat. Nothing about this felt like winning. It felt like something breaking where everyone could see it. Then movement to the right shifted the room again. 2 officers stepped toward Richard. His face barely changed, but his hands opened on the table as if preparing to argue. One officer spoke low. Richard nodded once, stood, and placed his wrist together. The sound of the cuffs was a small metallic click, but it carried. Every head turned. Reporters surged and jostled. Flashes hammered the space until my eyes watered. I took a step back, then another, keeping my balance while the floor seemed to tilt. Lydia's hand found my shoulder. Her fingers were warm and steady. "Truth always takes someone with it," she said softly, not celebrating, not gloating, just naming the cost. I looked toward the exit. A rectangle of gray sky waded through the glass, flat and honest. My breathing evened. My hands stopped shaking. I didn't move yet. I just stood in that noise and let it wash past me. In the crowd, people whispered new words. Not scam artist, not gold digger. A mother from my school caught my eye and nodded once, slow and sure. A reporter lowered his mic like he'd heard enough. A board member wrote something on a note and slid it toward a colleague. I stepped to the door. The handle was cool against my skin. Behind me, Valerie sobbed into a medic's hands. Chloe kept saying, "Mom, breathe," like she could order oxygen to obey. Richard stared at the floor as the officers guided him forward. His cuffed hands didn't shake. I pushed the door open and felt the outside air on my face. It tasted like dust and metal and rain that hadn't started yet. I closed my eyes for half a second, then opened them. I didn't feel saved. I felt steady. I took one step out and then another, and for the first time since the lake house, the word on people's lips wasn't fraud. They said a different one in small voices, like testing it out. The reluctant air.
Cold air sat on my face when I stepped out in Minneapolis. The brick warehouse looked stubborn and tired, but the door gave after one push. Inside smelled like paint and sawdust. Hammers tapped, then paused, then tapped again. A lift beeped and rolled past. A carpenter nodded at me. "Morning, morning," I said, hugging a rolled blueprint to my chest. It was the napkin drawing he once made, traced and cleaned up. A square for intake, a long room for counseling, a corner for crisis relief. I held it under the work light and checked the tape on the floor. Electricians threaded cable through the ceiling. Someone whistled. Someone swore at a stubborn screw. A temp sign leaned near the door. Whitman Compass Initiative, coming soon. I wiped dust off the letters with my sleeve. My phone buzzed. Lydia on video. "You're really doing it," she said. "We're building what he dreamed," I answered, voice steady but thin. "Not what they sold." She smiled, small and proud. "Send me the first budget sheet tonight." "I will." By noon, a reporter left a voicemail asking for a quote. Another blog posted a sidebar. "Air launches trust program in Midwest." I deleted the alerts and walked the halls again. A young worker lifted his goggles. "So, you're the woman from the case." I stopped, measured my breath, then nodded. "I'm the woman from the rebuild." He flushed. "Right. Good luck." "Thanks," I said, and kept moving. That night, I slept on a cot in the back office. Wind slid around the frames, the old windows humming. I opened the spreadsheet and typed the first 10 lines, line by line. Therapy grants, rent aid, legal counseling for families, grocery cards, emergency transport, school supply kits, teacher stipends for crisis hours, translated resources, hotline staffing, grief groups. No PR line, no car lease, no photo budget. I printed it and taped it to the wall above my desk. When the paper curled at the edges, I flattened it with my palm. Morning came with a thin sun. We laid an entry rug, rolled out second-hand chairs, wiped a smudge off the front glass. I brewed a vat of coffee in a dented urn. No ribbon, no podium. 12 people came, 5 staffers, 3 teachers, a bus driver, 1 single mom with a stroller. We moved, and the day moved with us. A teacher filled out a grant request for crisis sessions after school. A staffer walked a mother through rent assistance paperwork. A boy asked for a grocery card and then apologized for asking. I put it in his palm. "Eat tonight," I said. "Bring your mom tomorrow." He nodded hard and tucked it away. At break, Lydia touched my elbow. "You look like him when you talk about purpose." "He built the compass," I said quietly. "I just followed it." She watched me wipe a coffee ring from the intake table. Following takes courage, too. By the end of the week, the board in the hallway filled up with receipts. We posted every expense in neat columns: date, program, amount, outcome. A volunteer hung it with extra tape. Staff gathered around, reading. "No luxury cars, no PR budget," one of them said. "Feels weirdly honest." "That's the goal," I answered. "Weirdly honest." Students came with crayon drawings, stick figures, houses, plates of food, a dog that looked suspiciously like mine. We pinned them on a cork wall. Pastel colors crowded together until the brown board disappeared. A metal plaque arrived wrapped in paper. I peeled it back and ran my fingers over the stamped letters. "Built by belief, not blood." I mounted it beside my desk and stepped back. For the first time in months, my shoulders dropped and stayed dropped. Work found its rhythm.
A social worker called about a family living in a car. We covered a deposit and a week at a motel, then legal help to fight a housing scam. A principal asked for grief counselors after a student lost his father. We funded group sessions and pizza so no one would leave hungry. Staff learned each other's names, then birthdays. Someone brought cinnamon rolls that tasted like a small holiday. Mid-week, a new hire cleared his throat. "We should try an influencer push," he said, careful. "Maybe tell your story?" I turned from the whiteboard. "We measure lives changed, not followers gained." He nodded, cheeks pink. "Right. Sorry." "Don't be," I said, softening. "I know why you asked." A teacher lingered by the door at closing. "I wish Dr. Whitman could see this," she said. "He does," I answered, matter of fact. "Every time someone gets help." Her eyes shone. "Keep going." "I will." On Friday, we taped the Week 1 report under the plaque. People stood and read it silently. The numbers told their own story. 21 therapy hours funded, 9 rent gaps bridged, 14 legal consults, 63 grocery cards, 2 school supply closets restocked, 0 PR spend. A custodian whistled, low and impressed. Someone laughed, relieved. I held the marker and added a final line. Community volunteer hours, 118.
The building kept a peaceful hum as afternoon thinned out. The staff packed up slowly, the way people do when they don't want to leave a room that feels safe. I signed the last check of the day and flipped it onto the outgoing tray. My pen scratched to a stop. I took a breath, listened to the air return to normal. No cameras, no microphones, just voices and the rolling cart squeaking down the hall. The front desk radio crackled. Our security guard cleared his throat. "Visitor at the gate," he said. "Says her name is Chloe Baxter." My pen slipped from my fingers and clicked on the floor. I stood without meaning to. Lydia looked up from her laptop and studied my face. "You don't have to see her," she said, careful and even. I picked up the pen and set it down again. "Yes, I do." We walked toward the courtyard. The late sun cut through the windows in clean strips. Outside, the trees moved a little, like they were shaking off the day. I pushed open the door and felt the cool edge of evening. She stood at the gate, hugging a manila envelope to her chest. No camera crew, no sunglasses. Her hands shook against the paper. For a beat, neither of us spoke. The guard stepped back, giving space. Lydia stopped a few feet behind me, silent. Chloe lifted her eyes. They were red at the edges. She swallowed. "Marina," she said, voice small. I held her gaze, steady. The metal latch hummed in the wind. The courtyard held its breath. I didn't move yet. I didn't wave her in. I didn't turn away. I just met her eyes and let her know I was here, built, working, and ready to hear what she had to say. Frost clung to the courtyard benches. The flag snapped once and settled. I signed the last sheet of the day when the guard's voice came through the radio. "Visitor at the gate. Says her name is Chloe Baxter." My heart kicked, steady and hard. I stood, pulled on my coat, and walked out. Chloe hugged a manila envelope to her chest like it might walk away. No sunglasses, no gloss, dark smudges under her eyes. Her hands shook. I stopped at the gate. No cameras, no phones. She nodded. The latch groaned as it opened. We crossed into the thin winter light and sat at the stone table. No lawyer, no witnesses, just us. She set the envelope down and pushed it toward me. "These are therapy bills," she said, "and a summons. And my resume." I kept my hands in my pockets. "Why are you here?" "Because I can't fix anything without owning it," her voice rasped. "You had everything. Money, attention, a platform," I said. "Why break what wasn't yours?" Chloe stared at the table. "Because I thought it was mine." Everything was always hers. I wanted one win. Wind stirred the bare branches. We sat in it. Then she opened the envelope and slid out a notarized statement. "I burned the papers," she said, breath hitching. "I faked invoices. I helped him write the scripts." She swallowed. "You can use it in court. I deserve it." I skimmed the pages. Dates, vendors.
her signature stamped beside a seal. My chest tightened and then leveled out. "You did all this," I said, "for a version of love that doesn't exist." Her eyes filled. I wanted her to look at me the way she looked at you after the will. She finally did, just with hate. I held her stare, no heat left in me, just a dull ache. "Hate is easy," I said. "Living—"
I walked her to the warehouse. The team sorted coats and hygiene kits under warm lights. Tape guns snapped, pallets rolled. "You'll work nights," I said. "No cameras, no talking about the past. Only work." Chloe nodded and wiped her face with the back of her sleeve. She started folding boxes. Her hands trembled for the first few, then steadied. A boy in a school sweatshirt stepped up with a too-thin coat, the zipper stuck halfway. He held it like it had betrayed him. "Here," Chloe said. She knelt, checked the teeth, rubbed a tiny bit of soap, worked it up slow. The zipper caught and rose clean to his chin. "Thanks," he said, voice small but bright. "You're welcome," she answered, a wobbly smile that didn't try to sell anything to anyone. I watched from the doorway. Lydia joined me, arms folded against the cold. "You really gave her a job?" she asked. "No," I said. "I gave her a chance to do one right thing." We stayed until the last delivery went out. The warehouse thinned to quiet, vent fans spinning, scanner beeping once, then nothing. Staff waved, pulled on hats and gloves, and disappeared into the evening. I handed Chloe a water bottle. "Good work today," I said. She looked down, then up. "Same time tomorrow?" "Yes." She breathed out, short and shaky, then nodded. She gathered tape, markers, a box cutter, and lined them up before leaving. Small order where there used to be chaos. When the door closed behind her, I took the notarized confession to the office, opened the file cabinet, and slid it into a folder labeled Legal. The metal drawer clicked home. I crossed back through the darkened hallway with a single tulip I'd kept in a vase by the sink. The petals were white and clean. I set it beside Dr. Whitman's photo and rested my palm against the frame. The glass felt cool and steady. The guard poked his head in. "Everything good?" "All set," I said. "Want me to walk you out?" "I'm fine." The building held its breath for a moment, long enough to notice the silence wasn't empty anymore. It felt earned. I stepped into the courtyard. Frost glimmered along the edges of the stone. The flag moved once. I looked at the plaque on the wall and read the words I'd chosen the day we opened. Built by belief, not blood. "They worshipped perfection," I said, the sound barely above the air. "He taught me quiet power and mercy that works." I stayed there until my fingers cooled through my gloves. A bus rolled by on the street. A siren wailed and faded. My phone buzzed once in my pocket and fell quiet. I let the night finish closing, then locked the door and headed home. The next night, Chloe clocked in early. She tied her hair back, checked the list, and started counting inventory without being asked. She didn't reach for her phone once. She asked where to stack blankets for families sleeping in cars. She asked where the coat sizes ran small. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She worked for it. I didn't praise her more than anyone else. I didn't punish her more than anyone else. Fair rules, clear lines. When the boy from yesterday returned with his little sister, she knelt again, and the girl said, "Thank you for fixing my zipper." Chloe looked startled, then straightened, and gave the girl a real smile, not the kind that asks for anything in return. We closed late. She wiped the table without being told and turned off lights in the right order. "Same time tomorrow?" she asked again at the door. "Yes," I said. She left. I turned the tulip's vase half an inch so its stem wouldn't lean. I locked up and touched the plaque once more before the keys went in my pocket. Mercy, anchored to rules, felt like steel in my hands. That was the end I wanted. Quiet, useful, and mine. If you were me, would you have hired Chloe? Would mercy be your choice, or would you have walked her back to the gate? Tell me in the comments. If this story hit you, tap subscribe and share your take. What does real repair look like where you live?